when she started hitting me.
Like you did.
Yes,
You was unaware.
I was calling you that bitch ass nigga.
She was very aware. If you're 50 with little kids outside, you're gonna get into some little kid shit.
If you disrespect me and you're my son, Jonathan, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you every time.
I understand.
I am your mother.
By all means, I agree.
Me and you ain't never even had an argument in our lives. What is going on?
We
It sounds like you had a lot of animosity or something.
Like,
for somebody, you let somebody hit your mom, you had to have a lot of animosity.
What are you doing?
This didn't start with a press release. It didn't start with receipts. It started with frustration, a few sharp words, and a family dynamic that has been boiling for way too long. Because when Blueface finally snapped and said Karlissa was obsessed with Chrisean, the internet didn't just listen, it grabbed popcorn and turned the volume all the way up. What should have been a private family issue instantly turned into a public spectacle. One comment lit the fuse, and suddenly lives were going up, timelines were flooding, and trauma was being unpacked in real time like a suitcase that should have stayed closed. This wasn't a disagreement. This felt like years of tension leaking through the screen, and the wildest part, everyone watching already knew this was coming. This family drama has more episodes than a Netflix docuseries, and every season somehow gets messier. Forget reality TV, this made the Kardashians look like they run conflict resolution workshops, because when Blueface goes off, it's never quiet. And when Karlissa responds, she doesn't whisper, she unloads history, pain, resentment, and receipts that may not be written down, but feel heavy enough to break the internet anyway. This wasn't a random blow-up pulled out of thin air. This was pressure that had been stacking for years, finally finding a microphone. When Blueface accused Karlissa of being obsessed with Chrisean, it didn't land like shade. It landed like frustration finally snapping its fingers and saying, "I'm done pretending this is normal." Because obsession is not a casual word. Obsession suggests fixation. It suggests boundaries crossed so often they stop looking like boundaries at all. And once Blueface put that label out there, the internet didn't just react, it rewound, zoomed in, and started connecting dots that had been floating around for a long time. The tone mattered. This wasn't playful banter. This wasn't sarcasm for laughs. This sounded irritated, fed up, like someone who feels watched, questioned, and critiqued one too many times. And the moment that energy hit social media, people felt it immediately. Because when family drama turns public, it hits different. There's history attached. There's context people think they already understand. Karlissa didn't respond with a tweet. She didn't drop a slick caption. She went live. And when Karlissa goes live, it's never quiet. It's never short. It's never just about the headline. It's emotional unloading in real time. A mix of anger, hurt, memory, and self-defense all competing for space in the same sentence. The vibe shifted instantly. This stopped being about an insult and turned into a story about trauma. Karlissa began talking about her experiences, her pain, and how she felt treated, not just in this moment but over time. The way she spoke wasn't polished. It wasn't organized. It sounded like someone opening drawers they hadn't planned to open on camera, and that made people uncomfortable. Some viewers leaned in with empathy, saying this was a mother expressing deep wounds that never healed. Others leaned back, saying this felt like emotional chaos being aired for attention. And both sides stayed watching because discomfort doesn't stop engagement, it multiplies it. Blueface's comment became the spark that exposed a bigger issue. The internet wasn't just debating whether Karlissa was obsessed. They were debating control, influence, boundaries, who gets to speak on whose life. And when concern crosses into fixation, and right at the center of all of it was Chrisean, mostly silent, but constantly referenced, that silence spoke loudly. Because when two people argue intensely about someone who isn't even responding, it's rarely about that person alone. It's about what they represent. In this case, Chrisean represented loyalty, access, emotional priority, and possibly replacement. That's why the word obsessed hit like a nerve instead of a joke. People immediately started pulling up old clips, old interviews, old lives. Moments where Karlissa spoke passionately, some would say intensely about Chrisean. Some called it concern, others called it fixation. And once the internet starts rewatching history through a new lens, everything looks different. The reactions flooded in fast. Some viewers said Blueface was being disrespectful, accusing his own mother of something so personal in public. Others said he was finally saying what everyone had been thinking but was too afraid to say out loud. The comment sections turned into debate halls with zero moderators and maximum confidence. What made this explode wasn't just what was said, it was who said it. Blueface has always been blunt, but this time it felt more pointed. Less trolling, more resentment. And when someone who usually jokes sounds serious, people notice. The internet doesn't miss tone shifts. It feeds on them. Karlissa's live didn't calm things down. It widened the crack. As she spoke about trauma, viewers tried to decode whether this was healing or deflection, whether this was vulnerability or manipulation. And the truth is, the internet isn't equipped to handle real emotional complexity. It wants heroes and villains, not nuance. So it picked sides. Some people framed Karlissa as a hurt parent reacting to being dismissed and labeled unfairly. Others framed her as someone who refuses to let go, projecting pain outward instead of dealing with it privately. And the longer the live went on, the harder it became to separate pain from performance. Chrisean's name kept circling the conversation like a satellite. Every sentence seemed to orbit her, and that only strengthened Blueface's original claim in the minds of some viewers. Because when someone is the focal point of every argument, people start asking questions. Is it concern? Or is it control? Is it protection? Or is it fixation? Is it trauma speaking? Or is it attention demanding space? Those questions didn't get answered. They just multiplied. And that's where this situation crossed from family drama into public spectacle. Once the internet starts diagnosing relationships it doesn't live in, the narrative stops belonging to the people involved. It becomes crowd-owned. Memes started creeping in. Not full force yet, but enough to signal what was coming. Jokes about family group chats being aired out. Comments comparing this to reality TV but without contracts or editing. People saying this made celebrity families look messier than scripted drama. The Kardashians caught strays for no reason other than comparison, because chaos always gets measured against them. And somehow, this still made them look organized. The deeper issue underneath everything was control of narrative. Who gets to tell the story of Chrisean? Who gets to speak on Blueface's choices? Who gets to define boundaries in a family where boundaries seem permanently blurred? Blueface's accusation wasn't just about obsession. It was about interference. About feeling like his decisions, his relationships, and his priorities were constantly being analyzed and commented on. And once people understood that angle, the conversation shifted. This wasn't just disrespect. It was resentment. Karlissa's live, instead of shutting that narrative down, complicated it. Because while trauma explains behavior, it doesn't always excuse impact. And the internet lives for that contradiction. By the end of this phase, one thing was clear. This wasn't a one-off argument. This was a boiling pot that had finally lifted the lid. And once the lid comes off, everything spills: context, emotion, history, and all the things that were supposed to stay private. The audience wasn't just watching drama. They were watching a family dynamic unravel in public, one accusation at a time. Once Karlissa's live hit the timeline, the situation stopped being a disagreement and turned into an event. Not a conversation, not a misunderstanding, an event. The kind that hijacks feeds, derails group chats, and makes people who swore they were done with this family suddenly experts on it again. The internet didn't wait to process. It reacted first and asked questions later. Clips started circulating in pieces, not context. 10 seconds here, a facial expression there, a tone change pulled out and looped like it was a plot twist in a thriller. And once those fragments escaped, the narrative took on a life of its own. Karlissa's words were no longer hers. They belonged to captions, edits, and commentary channels with dramatic music and zero chill. The trauma angle changed everything, because once trauma enters the chat, criticism gets complicated. Some viewers immediately switched lanes, saying this wasn't drama anymore, this was pain being triggered in real time. They argued that Blueface crossed a line by using the word obsessed, that it minimized real emotional wounds and turned a mother's concern into a punchline. Others went the opposite direction just as fast. They said trauma doesn't excuse behavior. That explaining pain isn't the same as owning impact. That going live to unpack family issues publicly only feeds the chaos instead of healing it. And suddenly the comment sections weren't just arguing sides, they were arguing philosophy. What is concern versus control? What is protection versus fixation? What is vulnerability versus performance? Nobody agreed, but everyone participated. Memes hit next, because of course they did. Once the internet senses emotional tension, humor becomes a coping mechanism. Jokes about family group chats going public. Edits comparing the situation to reality TV without contracts. Someone said this made scripted drama look lazy. Another joke that therapists everywhere just felt a disturbance in the force, and once memes arrive, the story is officially out of the people's hands. Blueface didn't immediately respond again, and that silence spoke loudly. Some people read it as guilt, others read it as exhaustion. A few said he said what he said and meant it, and now he was letting the internet fight it out for him. Whatever the interpretation, the lack of clarification let speculation stretch its legs. Chrisean, meanwhile, stayed mostly quiet, and that silence, it drove people crazy, because when the entire argument revolves around someone who isn't speaking, the internet starts projecting. People filled in her thoughts, her motives, her reactions. Some claimed she was manipulating the situation without saying a word. Others said she was smart for staying out of it. Either way, her absence became a presence. Reaction channels smelled blood in the water. You know the type. Long pauses, heavy sighs. I don't usually talk about this, but energy. Everyone suddenly became a family dynamics analyst. Some leaned sympathetic, others went full critique. Neutrality barely existed, because neutrality doesn't trend. What pushed this into full escalation was how familiar it felt. Viewers started saying this wasn't new, that this family has been stuck in the same cycle for years. Accusations, lives, silence, then repeat. And once people start labeling something a pattern, patience disappears, old clips resurfaced again, this time with a different filter. Moments where Karlissa spoke passionately about Chrisean were reinterpreted. What once sounded like concern now sounded intense. What once sounded protective now sounded intrusive, at least to some viewers. Context shifted based on whatever side you were already on. And the internet doesn't switch sides easily. Blueface's obsessed comments started feeling less like an insult and more like a thesis statement for half the audience. They pointed to how quickly Karlissa's life circled back to Chrisean, how her name seemed unavoidable in the conversation. They argued that obsession doesn't always look aggressive, sometimes it looks emotional. The other half fired back hard, saying that reducing a mother's pain to obsession was lazy and cruel. That trauma doesn't present cleanly, that emotional reactions don't follow algorithms, and that expecting composure during public disrespect was unrealistic. Both arguments gained traction. That's the dangerous part of viral family drama. There's no referee, no neutral narrator, just competing interpretations fueled by personal experiences people project onto strangers. The situation bled into broader conversations too, about mothers and sons, about partners versus parents, about loyalty conflicts when relationships shift. People weren't just talking about Blueface and Karlissa anymore. They were talking about themselves through them. That's when engagement exploded. Hashtags started trending, not because of strategy, but because of momentum. Lives reacting to lives reacting to lives. The algorithm ate it up. Pain plus controversy equals clicks, and everyone knows it. Karlissa's trauma disclosure became both shield and spotlight. Some praised her courage, others accused her of weaponizing vulnerability. And that contradiction sat at the center of everything. Because trauma is real, but public platforms distort how it's received, nothing about this felt contained anymore. Friends and associates began getting dragged into the conversation by association. Who liked which post? Who stayed silent? Who unfollowed who? The internet treats social media behavior like evidence, even when it's meaningless, and still, no clear resolution appeared. No apology, no reconciliation, no calm explanation tying everything together. Just fragments, reactions, and rising tension. By now, The original accusation had mutated. It wasn't just obsessed, it was about power, about who gets emotional access, about whose voice carries weight, about who feels replaced when priorities change. And once those themes surface, the story stops being about individuals and starts being about systems. Family systems, fame systems, internet systems that reward exposure over healing. Viewers weren't asking who was right anymore. They were asking how this ends. Because public family conflicts don't fade quietly. They either escalate or go dormant, waiting for the next trigger. And this one felt far from resolved. By the time the noise dipped from a roar to a low hum, the damage had already settled into places that don't show up on camera. Not the kind of damage that trends for a day and disappears, but the quiet kind that reshapes how people are seen, trusted, and interpreted moving forward. Because once family conflict becomes public, there's no such thing as a clean rewind. Blueface didn't walk his words back, and that mattered. The absence of a follow-up apology or clarification let his accusation sit exactly where it landed. For some viewers, that silence read as confidence. For others, it felt cold. But either way, it turned the word obsessed into a permanent lens people now use when watching Karlissa's every move. Every future comment, every reaction, every mention of Chrisean would now be filtered through that accusation, whether fair or not. That's how internet narratives work. They don't fade, they calcify. Karlissa, on the other hand, walked away from her live having exposed something far heavier than she may have intended. Trauma doesn't exist neatly on social media. Once it's shared publicly, it stops belonging solely to the person who lived it. It gets analyzed, debated, doubted, and reinterpreted by strangers who don't carry the same weight. Some people saw her as brave. Others saw her as spiraling. And a third group couldn't decide which made them more uncomfortable. That split followed her everywhere. Every clip of Karlissa after that moment was watched differently. Her tone, her focus, her emotional intensity. Things that once felt normal now felt amplified. And whether viewers sympathized or criticized, they were paying closer attention than ever before. That's the hidden consequence of going live during emotional moments. You don't just share pain. You change the way people read you forever. Chrisean's continued silence became its own statement. To some, it looked like maturity. To others, manipulation. People debated whether staying quiet was the smartest move or the loudest one. And the longer she stayed out of it, the more power her absence carried. Entire narratives were built around what she might be thinking, what she might be feeling, what she might do next. She didn't need to say anything. The internet spoke for her anyway. And then there was the family dynamic itself. Once viewers zoomed out, a darker realization set in. This wasn't a single argument. This was a system that had been breaking down in public for years. A cycle of confrontation, exposure, reaction, silence, and repeat. Each new moment didn't shock anymore. It confirmed what people already suspected, that these relationships were strained in ways that cameras only partially captured. Public perception shifted from messy to fragile, and fragility doesn't trend well for Blueface. The situation reinforced an image he's been wrestling with for a long time. The artist who refuses to soften, even when the consequences hit close to home. Some praised his honesty, saying he finally drew a boundary that needed to be drawn. Others accused him of being dismissive toward emotional realities he didn't want to deal with. But what stuck wasn't praise or criticism. It was distance. People started talking about emotional detachment, about how calling someone obsessed can be a way to shut down conversation instead of resolving it, about how public callouts change family dynamics permanently. And once those conversations start, they don't stop at one situation. They follow the person. Karlissa's trauma disclosure added another layer to that conversation. It forced people to confront an uncomfortable truth about online culture. That trauma is often believed only when it's convenient, and dismissed when it complicates a narrative. Viewers argued over whether her pain was being unfairly reduced to behavior, or whether behavior was being unfairly excused by pain. There was no consensus, and that lack of consensus is exactly what keeps stories alive. Friends and associates of everyone involved began moving more cautiously. Likes disappeared. Comments stopped. Silence spread outward like a ripple. Because when family drama gets this public, proximity becomes risk. Nobody wants to be dragged into a narrative they didn't help create. The internet noticed that too. Who stayed quiet? Who unfollowed who? Who suddenly stopped posting? Every small action was treated like evidence, even when it wasn't. That's when this situation fully crossed from drama into consequence. Not legal consequence. Not career-ending fallout. But relational consequence. Trust erodes. Communication tightens. Public perception hardens. And none of that shows up in a headline. The biggest shift, though, was emotional fatigue. Even fans who picked sides started admitting they were tired. Tired of watching pain become content. Tired of family wounds being reopened on live streams. Tired of cycles that never resolve, only reset. That fatigue didn't kill engagement, but it changed the tone. Less excitement, more resignation. That's sad replaced that's wild. And that's a dangerous place for public figures to land, because once audiences stop being entertained and start feeling uneasy, the dynamic changes. They don't disengage immediately. They watch differently, more critically, less forgiving. This story didn't end with closure. There was no heartfelt reconciliation, no mutual understanding, no moment where everyone agreed to step back. Just unresolved tension hanging in the air like humidity before a storm, and storms don't announce themselves. What lingered was a question nobody could answer yet. Is this the moment things finally shift? Or is this just another chapter in a cycle that refuses to break? Because once words like obsessed and trauma are thrown into the same public conversation, you don't get to pretend it didn't happen. Those words stick. They shape future interactions. They follow every new clip, every new live, every new argument. The internet won't forget this one. Not because it was loud, but because it was revealing. And until someone decides to change the pattern instead of feeding it, this story doesn't feel finished. And just like that, one word cracked open years of tension. Obsessed wasn't just an insult, it was a trigger. And once trauma, silence, and family history collide on the internet, there's no such thing as a quiet ending. If you're still here, you didn't just watch drama, you watched a family fracture in real time. Now let's be honest. Was Blueface finally setting a boundary that needed to be set? Or did he cross a line by calling out his own mother in public? And did Karlissa's live bring understanding? Or did it pour gasoline on a fire that never cools down? Drop your real opinion in the comments. Not the polite one, the honest one. This conversation doesn't move without you. If this video made you pause, rewind, or mutter, "Nah, this is crazy," even once, smash that like button like it owes you money. Hit it the way the internet hits replay, hard and without hesitation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and fix that right now. Because stories like this don't come with warnings, and we break them down every time the internet turns family pain into public spectacle. Turn on notifications too, because drama doesn't schedule itself. One live, one comment, one emotional slip, that's all it takes for everything to explode again. And you already know we'll be right here when it does. Family issues don't disappear just because the live ends. They linger, they resurface, and on the internet, they never stay private for long. So stay locked in, stay observant, and stay ready. Because over here, we don't just talk fame, we expose the cracks behind it. This is Fame Flaws, where celebrity drama meets uncomfortable truth.